welcome back to Nature Against the Noise, episode 3. Sometimes healing your nervous system does not begin with a breakdown. Sometimes it begins with a quiet feeling that something in your life no longer fits. You cannot explain it, nothing dramatic may have happened, and you might still be going to work, looking after your family, answering your messages and keeping up appearances, doing all the things that you've always done. But inside, something feels different. Something has started to shift. And that is what I want to talk about today. I call it the thawing of the nervous system. And this is the process of waking up from survival autopilot, people-pleasing, suppression over functioning, emotional numbness and old patterns. It is the process of slowly coming back into truth, regulation, self-respect and eventually freedom. Now, before I go into the 5 stages, this is not about diagnosing yourself, and it's not about attaching another label to who you are. It's not about making yourself wrong for where you are within the stages either. This is simply a framework, a way to understand what may be happening when you start to feel more aware, more sensitive, more emotional, more honest, and less able to tolerate the life you once accepted. So let's start with stage 1, the subtle thaw. Stage 1 is subtle, it's soft, it's the flicker before the flame. In stage 1, you are still living inside the world that you've always known, the same routines, the same roles, the same expectations and the same systems. You are functioning and you're doing what you've always done. But something inside you has started to shift, not dramatically and not loudly, just quietly. And you may notice things feel different. You feel different. You are more aware than you were before, and you're more sensitive to what does not feel right. You are noticing patterns you used to ignore, and you feel slightly detached from your old life. You feel confused but curious, and you cannot fully explain it, but you cannot deny it. For some people, this stage feels spiritual, and it may be experienced that way, but often the first layer is your nervous system coming back online after years of autopilot. So you want to stop performing roles and living up to external ones. You're running on survival patterns or staying busy so you didn't have to feel yourself. Then one day that numbness starts to crack and you become more aware, more sensitive, more intuitive, more reactive, more emotional and more observant and more connected, but also more uncomfortable. This stage can last years, not because you're slow or because you're failing, but because fear can keep you here. Your life is still organised around external structure, and you may still want to fit in, you may still want approval, and you still want to choose comfort over clarity. And that's often where people become drawn to deeper meanings like signs, synchronicities, tarot, astrology readings, moon rituals, crystals, labels, and content that makes them feel like they're awake. None of that's stupid or embarrassing. These things are the first doorway into self-awareness, and they can offer comfort, symbolic language, or a sense of connection, a gentle way into your inner world. But they can also become a trap if they replace the deeper work, because awakening is not just seeing signs or collecting spiritual language. Real integration asks more. It asks for boundaries, truth-telling, grief, anger, behaviour change, responsibility for your choices. And a regulated nervous system is not built through aesthetics alone. It's built through the daily practice of becoming honest with yourself and learning to live differently. And this is where stage 2 begins. Stage 2 is the disillusionment stage. It's not as soft as stage 1. The disillusionment starts with yourself and then with the structures that you've been living inside. This is where things start to feel less magical and more confronting. You begin to notice where you've been self-abandoning. You see where you said yes where your whole body meant no. You see where you tolerated disrespect. You see where you stayed quiet to keep the peace, and you see where you edited yourself to remain acceptable. You see the life you built around survival, and it can hurt. There can be a lot of anger in this stage, and anger is not bad. Anger can be clarifying, and anger can show you where a boundary was crossed. But anger can reveal where you've been silencing yourself as well. But staying in anger forever is not healing. It can become another prison. In stage 2, your nervous system may swing between clarity and overwhelm. One moment you see everything clearly, the next moment you feel flooded. Your ego can flare during this stage as well because your control is slipping, and you may feel grief from the life that you tolerated. Maybe you started telling you the truth that you've been editing for years, and then the disillusion spreads outwards. You begin to see how roles, incentives, families, systems, work environments and social expectations shape people's behaviour, and you recognise where certain systems reward compliance and punish honesty. You feel social friction when you stop playing your old part, and this part is important. Stage 2 is not about becoming suspicious of everything, and it's not about blaming the whole world. It's not about deciding that everyone is toxic and every structure is evil. It's about being honest about what is real while learning to stay regulated as you rebuild your life around that honesty. Many people get stuck here, some for the rest of their lives. They begin to see the truth externally, but they avoid looking internally, and they blame everything outside of them. But they do not ask, where am I still choosing this? Where am I still participating, and where am I afraid of change? And I say that with compassion because this stage can be painful. Some people stay in anger for years and it feels powerful. But if you stay there for too long, anger can harden into resentment, and resentment can become its own form of fear. The work in stage 2 is learning to tell the truth without losing yourself in the fire of it. And then comes stage 3. Stage 3, the collapse of old self. And it's where people often call it the dark night of the soul, because your nervous system is receptive and can be understood to the part where your system refuses to tolerate old patterns anymore. This is the collapse of your old self, and it can feel brutal. This is the stage where you have a lot of emotional crashes, tears, grief, confusion, exhaustion, a feeling of not knowing who you are anymore, and the coping mechanisms that you used to rely on may start to feel unbearable. The distractions do not work the same way that they did, and the people pleasing becomes impossible. The old roles feel too tight, and the old identity starts to die. And then comes the grief of the version of you that survived that way, the grief of you that lost yourself, the grief of relationships that cost you your well-being, the grief of the boundaries you didn't have, the grief of the treatment you tolerated, the grief of the life you thought that you were supposed to want. You may lose relationships in this stage, you may leave jobs, you may stop fitting into groups you once belonged to, and you may look around at your life and realise you cannot go back to who you were. But going forward feels impossible. That space can feel terrifying, and you may swing between shutdown and clarity. One day you feel strong, the next day you feel like you're falling apart. But often what feels like a breakdown is actually breaking you open. Your system is no longer allowing you to survive in the same way. And while it can be deeply uncomfortable, it can also be the beginning of something much more honest. This stage, it needs tenderness, support and rest. It needs safe people, grounding, and you need to remember that you're not failing because the old version of you is dissolving. You are in a transition, and eventually, if you stay within the process, stage 4 begins. This is the reconstruction and regulation stage. It's where the nervous system starts building a new baseline, and this is where you begin learning to regulate instead of react. You start rebuilding routines that actually support you, and you begin choosing truth over comfort. You become less afraid to speak honestly and start setting boundaries without drowning in guilt. You become more selective with your energy, your time, your attention, and your relationships. This does not mean that you become cold, it means that you become clearer. It does not mean that you stop loving people, it means you stop abandoning yourself to keep access to them. You may start realising people cannot meet you with honesty, respect or emotional maturity. You don't have superiority, but your body no longer feels safe pretending that certain dynamics are okay. Stage 4 can feel empowering, but it can also be tender. You're stronger, but you're still building. You may feel joy returning and clarity, self-respect, all slowly, and you may start saying things like, I feel different. I'm not tolerating that anymore. I don't know who I am becoming, but I like it. And this is the stage where your behaviour starts to match your awareness. You are not just thinking differently, you are living differently and making different choices. You are communicating more honestly, resting before you collapse, and are noticing your body before it screams. And you're learning the difference between peace and avoidance, between intuition and anxiety, and between compassion and self-abandonment. This is the reconstruction. And then comes stage 5. Stage 5 is integration and embodiment. This is the stage many people want, but not everyone reaches, because it requires consistency, honesty, and nervous system stability. And this is where you stop performing healing and actually start living it. You don't need to tell everyone you're healed, because you just are. You don't need to collect labels. You don't need to build an identity around being spiritually awakened or different. You are just you. You live more authentically. You speak your truth without performance. You make choices that match your values. Your boundaries become more natural, and your relationships feel cleaner. Your intuition becomes calm, not dramatic, and you don't react like you once did. Life starts to feel simpler, not perfect, not easy all the time, but simpler. And you are not emotionally numb. You still feel care and you can still hurt, but you're not as easy to pull out of yourself. People can misunderstand you, judge you, project onto you, or even insult you, and it does not have the same effect that it once did, because your nervous system has built a different kind of resilience, and you are no longer outsourcing your identity to other people's approval or attaching yourself to every external influence. And you're no longer watching videos online and assuming it must be a sign specifically for you. You begin to see how much content is designed to attract your attention, keep you distracted, and pull you away from things that actually matter. At this stage, you come home to yourself. Your boundaries, your confidence, they're all quieter, and your life is quieter. You're not chasing or avoiding everything. You're just living. And maybe that is what freedom really is, not being untouchable above everyone or being permanently calm, but being able to be yourself without constantly abandoning your body, your truth, or your values. So if you recognise yourself in one of these stages, do not use it as another label to attach to. Use it as information, and ask yourself, where am I becoming more honest? Where am I still choosing comfort over truth? Where am I blaming the outside world but avoiding the part that I can actually change? Where is my body asking me to stop performing and start listening? And where have I mistaken awareness for integration? Because awareness is powerful, but awareness alone is not the end. The real work is what you do with what you know. It is how you live, choose to speak, rest, your boundaries, and how you stop betraying yourself in the small daily ways. The thawing of the nervous system can feel confusing, emotional, and uncomfortable, but it can also be the beginning of life that is more honest, more regulated, and more truly yours. If this episode resonated with you and you would like to understand the nervous system more deeply, I'm running a Zoom session this Sunday. You can comment or message me the word system and I will send you the link. And if you know someone who is in that strange space between who they used to be and who they're becoming, send this episode to them. It might help them feel less alone.